Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between, with your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this time I'm talking with underwater fine art photographer Lexi Lane. Lexi's work is beautiful and painterly, and mostly shot in the clear waters of the ocean, which adds a level of difficulty for her as she lives in England, not a land known for its visibility. So she travels the world in search of perfect locations to shoot in. We talk about her approach to photographing in the ocean around Europe, freediving the cenotes of Mexico, and what she likes about selling her work at art shows. Also, a little disclaimer on this episode as the audio isn't the best, so apologies if it's a little hard to listen to. Okay, let's dive in. Lexi, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's lovely to speak to you, Brett.
Yeah, you too. I know we kind of met recently at the other art fair here in LA, which was really nice. How was that art fair for you?
It was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's fast becoming one of my favourite fairs to attend and exhibit at. It's, run by really nice people. And I've been doing one of the fairs that they organise in London for a few years now. So, I thought I would try going over the pond and seeing what the American market is like for selling underwater artwork.
Yeah, and so what's it like? How's it been?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I really like... I like how people in LA are very, very friendly and they really like to talk about art. And I think the Brits can be a little bit more reserved occasionally.
Right.
So I really like that. It's a very welcoming and friendly place.
I think that's so because I'm not American, obviously. But I mean, I actually am because I just became a citizen yesterday.
Oh, did you? Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So I've got to stop saying I'm not American because I am. So in terms of the markets, though, for fine art photography, what would you say is the differences between the UK and America?
I don't see a huge difference, really. I think both markets, I mean, I have very limited experience in the US, but both markets seem to be very accepting and interested in underwater photography or photography generally and limited edition prints. I found that I have a lot of collectors in the US and in the UK and Australia as well, actually.
Oh, right. Yeah. Do they tend to be people that have already collected other underwater art, or are they coming in from a certain sort of demographic? How are people sort of finding you?
I don't think so. I think the thing I hear more often than not is that people haven't seen any kind of work like mine before. So, it's not necessarily people that seek out underwater photography specifically, just people who are into art generally.
And what do they think when they see your work for the first time? What are they kind of picking up on?
Oh, it's a good question. It's a hard one. I mean, I do ask people that when I exhibit at exhibitions, but I think it's kind of like what I hope to achieve with my work is to gain some kind of emotional response, I suppose, to my work. Yeah. And I think people who choose to buy my work, they tend to have some kind of reaction, hopefully a positive one. But I do get the odd person at fairs. That's the great thing about showing your work. It's kind of like you put your heart out there, I suppose, and you get good reactions and you get all reactions. You get real reactions, which is quite good feedback.
I think that's so I'd never really been to an art fair before, and I came to the other art fair in LA here, and what I found was I was drawn to work that I hadn't even thought about, like the style of things. I'd just be walking around and be like, oh wow, okay, I never even thought about being interested in that, but it's really caught my eye. So you must get a lot of that of people sort of coming and just sort of discovering you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the benefits of showing at these things, because the art fair themselves as organisers will have huge mailing lists and contacts, and so they get a large amount of people through the doors, people who you wouldn't have an opportunity to put your work in front of otherwise. so you've got like a captive audience, and yeah, it's really helpful way of getting your work out there.
Yeah. And how important do you think with those sorts of things is being approachable and being with your work? Do you feel like your personality kind of helps people to sort of fall in love with the work more?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I think when we make underwater photographs, there's so much we can talk about, like how they're made and stories behind each shoot, and people find that engaging. I think I've got a lot of friends who are artists, and some who find it easier talking about their artwork, from every discipline, like painting, sculpture, and I think with what we do, it's so much easier to talk about, because there are just straight away you can, say that you're a freediver, and your models are freedivers too, and immediately people find it quite fascinating.
Yeah, people are kind of drawn to the whole, like the actual creation of the image, right? Like rather than the end result on its own.
Yeah, both, I think. Absolutely. I think if somebody is, as you said, when you were walking around the fair, if you're immediately drawn to something, then, hearing the backstory behind it is just like icing on the cake.
Yeah, totally. So, and in kind of talking about backstory, so how did you end up shooting underwater?
Oh, that's a long story. It's probably it's probably very similar to how a lot of us get into it. I started off as a water baby as a child, snorkeling and diving down and picking up shells and being obsessed with the water from a very young age. And at the same time being obsessed with art. And they were my two kind of like favorite things when I was growing up. So when I went to university, I studied fine art and quickly ended up specializing in photography, and concentrated on kind of like figurative photography, photographing women back then as well. Not much has changed. And when I graduated, I realized that to, survive and thrive as an artist would be challenging. And I ended up working as a commercial photographer, above water photography, for 20 years, I suppose. That's showing my age.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then I think maybe like 15 years into doing that, I started thinking about doing underwater photography as a way of combining my passions together and doing it as like a little side project to what I was doing work-wise, in a way to keep me inspired and have some work that was just for me, without a client and without a brief, Yeah. So yeah, that's how it started. And that was, I bought my first housing for a digital camera, I think probably about 10 years ago now.
Okay.
And it started as a hobby, and it was way back when Instagram was really easy to gain a organic following. And I got people asking me pretty quickly if they could buy prints of my work, and it started from there, I suppose.
So what was the type of work you were doing commercially?
Portraiture mainly, wedding photography, anything that was people based.
Okay.
Always liked working with people.
Yeah. So when you jumped underwater, did you kind of did you have a style, like an above water style that you were kind of like, I want to try and recreate this underwater? Or was it like a fresh start for you?
I think I had an aesthetic that I enjoyed, that kind of the golden hour light that is even more spectacular underwater. That sort of, using light in a way that adds some kind of drama to an image. Yeah. Is something that I was drawn to above water, and underwater it blew my little brain away how amazing light can behave underwater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like its own set of brushes, really, isn't it? Like it's its own little toolbox, just being under the water.
Definitely.
You have such a specific sort of color palette as well, especially in the work that I've seen most recently, which is the beautiful greens and the warm colors in there. Was that something that you had always sort of lent towards, or was that something you kind of evolved over time?
I think my underwater work has always been quite warm. I think because of the way the color spectrum works and how red tones, warm tones disappear so quickly underwater. I've always liked to edit my images in a way that, brings back skin tones so that they are more natural. And in doing so, it can make the, surrounding area seem a little less natural. But I quite like that. I quite like the fact that it can make the images seem a bit more surreal, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely works. And that's something that I've really liked as well. Like within my work is trying to get away from the common underwater palette a little bit. And another photographer that I was speaking to recently is Alison Bounce, who's a French photographer. And she was saying that when she got into underwater, she wanted to get as much blue out of the images as possible.
Yeah, I mean, my first underwater camera that I had was a Nikonis camera. Oh, I can hear your dog now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Nikonis 35mm film camera back in the early noughties, and you used to be able to get like a red filter that you'd screw onto the front, and that was to like counteract the blueness of the water.
Yeah,
kind of do these things digitally now, I suppose. Some people still use red filters.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of, for me, just because I shoot raw all the time, and I like not having to put anything in front of the camera and kind of do it all in post. But so when you started, you were shooting film? Yeah.
When I was at art school, I learned everything on film, black and white mainly. I've started making some new work recently, which is black and white, actually, underwater work, which is black and white, and it's kind of taking me back to my youth. It's quite nice. Still digital though. I'd like to get back into doing some 35mm film stuff underwater. I think it could be quite fun.
Do you still have playful. Do you still have that camera?
I sold it actually, but I recently bought another one on eBay, exactly the same as I had back then. And I discovered last time I was in LA that the only person that specializes in servicing the Nikonis cameras is actually based in LA, so that's quite handy.
Oh, right.
Replace all of the rubber bits, which, perish over time, especially when the camera's made in the 1980s.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've kind of looked into getting one of those because I work a lot with strobes, and those Nikonos cameras had a little sync port. So I'm actually kind of really interested in being able to shoot film and strobes and kind of shoot my style, but on film. It's something I've wanted to do. I haven't gotten around to, but yeah.
That sounds cool. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. Was there a certain film stock when you were shooting on that camera that you kind of liked the most?
I used to like Ilford film, like black and white Ilford. I haven't kind of looked into what is available when it comes to colour film. I remember I used to really enjoy shooting slide film.
Yeah.
Way back then, but it's what's available these days. And it's also traveling with these things is quite challenging because they've got these really intense scanners now at airports. So kind of like how you shoot film when you're traveling to destinations and bringing the film back without it being destroyed in the scanners is something that I need to figure out as well.
Yeah, totally. I remember once, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, being at the airport. I can't remember which airport, but there was someone who was on their way to like Antarctica or something for 6 months, and he had 6 months worth of film with him.
Wow.
And they made him take everything out of every container. And so it was crazy. We were there for ages waiting for this all to go through the X-ray and everything. And then he had to put it all back in again and then hope that all this film was still okay.
Wow. It's a risk, isn't it, when you spend months and months shooting without knowing that it's going to, come to anything.
Without even being able to see it, But, at least with digital, you can kind of look at it and go, okay, well, this was good. I did well. Let's go out again tomorrow.
Or the opposite, that was shit. I need to redo all of that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But at least within minutes whether you were terrible or not. Well, that's a good question. So do you find it much easier to work with digital? Or do you think you would do this as a job if you were still shooting film?
I don't know. I'd like to be able to do both and compare. I can't imagine ever giving up digital just because it, as you said, the results are so immediate and you can see straight away. And for me, it's part of the creative process. You know, you're underwater, you shoot something and you look at the back of your camera and just something that happened in that shot triggers an idea. You can spend the rest of the shoot just trying to explore that particular thing. That's something that you don't have at all with film. So yeah, there's definitely benefits.
Yeah. No, and that's a really good point, actually. And something that I love, because I do shoot with strobes, is the strobes don't always go off. And I'll find different lighting setups through errors. So, you know, that backlight didn't go off, but wow, look at this kind of effect of it. I didn't even think about doing this.
Yeah.
So that chaos of being able to see what is happening straight away and then pivoting your approach, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. With the, you know, how many variables and things to think about shooting underwater, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. Which kind of brings me to how do you work underwater? Are you using scuba? Are you just on freedive? What's your sort of process?
Just freediving. I say just freediving. It's I was a scuba diver before I took up freediving, but it was around the same time that I started doing underwater photography that I joined my local freediving club here in the UK. It's a fantastic club called No Tanks. I'm going to give a shout out to that.
Nice.
And I quickly realized as soon as I started shooting underwater that in order to get better at it, it would be better if I could hold my breath for longer. So that's why I joined my club and, you know, discovered a incredible sport in the process, which I do for, you know, pure pleasure as well as helping my career.
Yeah, totally. And so you're in the south of England?
Yes, yeah, I'm like maybe 50 miles south of London, and that's little city called Brighton on the English Channel coast on the sea. The sea is not very nice here, sadly. I definitely couldn't shoot in open water here because it's the visibility is shocking. You'd be lucky to see your hand in the water right in front of your face.
Yeah. So how does that go for you? Just training freediving and stuff? Is that where you're training? Just out off the coast there?
We train in pools twice a week doing dynamic freediving, so lengths underwater.
Yeah.
And lots of fun activities and breathing exercises and And then our club goes off on amazing trips around the world and to lakes in the UK as well to work on depth stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah. Are there lakes in the UK that you would shoot in that are clear enough?
No, they're not clear either.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I've made it really difficult for myself living here, but I love traveling, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I tend to, my year is quite cyclical in that I have sort of periods where I'm in my studio editing, producing, and then I'll have a period where I'm exhibiting and selling, and then I have periods where I go off shooting. So I quite like the variety that brings. If I lived somewhere like where I really like shooting, I don't know whether it would become just so kind of like available and on my doorstep that I might not appreciate it as much, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. But that's a good point, because I've spoken to photographers who live in like on the east coast of the States who can't shoot, you know, for sort of 6-8 months of the year because it's too cold. But they spend that time, you know, conceiving and kind of planning and scheming for the next time they get to shoot. And I kind of like the idea of that, where you can kind of have some downtime and really plan some stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you a lot of thinking time. I've got a constant, like, you know, like notes in your iPhone. It's just titled Underwater Ideas. And whenever something pops into my head when I'm driving or not sleeping, then I write it down. And then by the time a trip comes around, I normally do like 2 trips a year. Then I'll, look back at that list, usually a month or 2 before the trip, and start gathering what I might need to be able to, work on some of those ideas.
Are there places that you sort of go to all the time to sort of shoot? Have you got your sort of favorite destinations, or are you kind of like just spreading yourself all over in different places?
I'd like to spread myself more.
Yeah.
I'd like to travel to, places that are unknown. The problem with doing that is that obviously they're so unknown that you spend a lot of the time doing recce missions and, kind of exploring. And I love that part of doing the underwater photography in open water.
Yeah.
But the only problem with that is that obviously you don't get as much work done in the, set time that you have on the trip. And at the end of the day, the work that I do is my career. And so I need to think about how much successful images I'll have by the end of a trip and what I can take away and hopefully sell. So for that reason, I do tend to go back to Mexico quite a lot because the cenotes are just reliable and beautiful.
Yeah, and amazing.
And they're my aesthetic. So that I go there a lot. And then in the summer in the UK, I will go to the Mediterranean because the water there is really clear as well. It's a little bit more challenging being open water, ocean, sea, as opposed to inland bodies of water, because obviously there's more variables with sediment and wind and tides and waves and all of that stuff. But I think when you get really kind of perfect conditions, magical kind of light and everything like that, then it pays off. So
well, that's my kind of feeling as well, is that I love shooting in my studio pool. It's all very contained, it's all very controllable, but I do love the sort of the unexpected beauty and the chaos of the open water side of things, where you might get a certain ray of light coming through, or there might be the amazing landscapes and stuff. It just makes it all so much worthwhile getting out there and kind of making the effort.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the time it doesn't necessarily come together, but for the times it does, I think it's worth it. I think for me in my work, the natural environment is kind of key to what I do. And so I don't think I've ever done any underwater shoots in a pool. It's a bit crazy. Actually, when I first bought my very first digital underwater camera housing, I did a test shoot in a pool.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just kind of, I like natural light. I like natural rock formations. Yeah, I think my work is about kind of celebrating the beauty of our beautiful oceans, really. So.
Oh no, totally. Yeah, and you have such an organic aesthetic, even down to the poses and the costumes that the models are wearing. It's all very, it seems all very organic.
Good.
That was what you were going for, I hope.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you ever shoot with male models?
I have once or twice, but not in recent years. I think I do get asked that a lot, actually, when I exhibit my work. It's always a question. Well, it's often a question that people ask is, why is it just women? Yeah. And I think the reason is when I first started taking photographs of women underwater, it was I guess I saw, it was always a single female in the water. And I guess it was a representation of how I feel when I'm in the water and trying to represent that kind of sensation that I experience. And so they're kind of self-portraits in one way, I guess.
Yeah.
If I looked that graceful in the water. People also ask me if any of my work are self-portraits. I'm like, no.
Have you ever gotten in front of the camera?
No. I've got a couple of models that I work with, a couple of really wonderful Cornish models. They're amazing mermaids that come on trips with me. One is Laura Evans and one is Emma Harper, and they're both very inspiring people to work with. And they both joke with me that they're going to put me in a dress and see how it feels.
Yeah.
It'd be very embarrassing, I think.
Are you just totally adverse to it? Like it's just like it would never happen?
No, not at all. I probably should experience what they experience, but I know from having put on a mermaid tail for fun, I know the sensation of water shooting up my nose is not my favorite thing. I know that facially I won't look particularly good underwater.
Right.
Quite contorted, probably. I have no idea how they do it. I think that skill of being able to look so serene with all of that going on and not being able to see fully. I think it's just incredible what they do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that I think as photographers, we kind of forget and we take for granted as to, all what they're actually going through to get these shots. And it's something that I teach in my workshops is I will actually take all my photographers and get them to take their mask off and be in front of the camera, and I get them to pose and do all the things that we're asking our models to do.
That's
so that we
great.
can get an idea of how it feels, it can be painful or it can be fine. Everyone's different.
Yeah. Do you put like guys in dresses? Because that would be quite funny to see.
If they're up for it, yeah, for sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it.
I
really are up for it.
Yeah, some of them are just like, I totally want to do this, and others are just like, no, thank you. Like I just, I'm just doing this to get through the course. So it's interesting. We all have our different reasons for why we shoot and what we shoot.
Yes, indeed.
So with your work, is there a message or a theme or anything you're trying to get through with your work, or is it just literally kind of creating beautiful imagery? Is there any kind of purpose behind it?
Purpose. Yeah. What is the purpose of art? That is a good question.
if that's not insulting, yeah.
No, that's not an insult at all. It's a good question. I think, definitely. As I was saying, like my images started off as being like a kind of representation of me and how I feel in the world, I suppose, and especially this kind of mysterious underwater world. But the more time that I've spent in the oceans, the more time that I've seen the human effect on the oceans, it's bringing more and more the ideas into my work, which kind of is perhaps a comment on how we need to take care of the oceans better, as us as humans, as a race, look after the water better and the marine life. And I am always trying to sort of think of ways that I can express those ideas, like whether they are quite obvious expressions, like getting huge sheets of plastic in the water with models, or slightly more subtle messages that, I feel when I'm creating them, but might not necessarily be immediately obvious to the viewer. I quite like kind of playing with that balance, I guess.
Like a little ambiguity in terms of, not being blatant with the message.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of my most successful artworks from a kind of sales point of view are pieces that make comments about how we mistreat the oceans, and people, when they see the image initially, when the viewer sees the image initially at fairs and exhibitions, I think their first reactions can often be like, oh, that's really beautiful. And then when you kind of explain the underlying message, they're like, well, that's really clear. I don't know why I didn't see that. But people still choose to purchase pieces of artwork in spite or because of that. It's not like some... I guess I was worried when I started making artwork that made these statements that it would come across as either judgy or so dark and miserable,
right?
that people might not want to have that kind of thing on their walls. But I think with any kind of artwork, there's a niche in everything, and if your artwork connects with somebody, then that's all that matters, really. If it speaks to somebody, then you find your buyers.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think also, is that it might speak to them in a way that you hadn't intended.
It's true. Absolutely.
And I think we had this conversation when we met at the art fair was, should you tell people what is the meaning behind your picture, or should you just let them make it up for themselves?
I do both, I think. I think I judge it by how people are reacting. If they're asking lots of questions, then I will tell them. But sometimes people are like, I don't care what it's about, I just love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, fine, I'll take your money.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that it just, people might not be aware of why it speaks to them. They just like it. They might not have a full essay in their mind of what this actually means. But if an image strikes something in them, then that's enough, right? Yeah,
I mean, that's, I buy a lot of art, probably too much for the size of my house and my budget.
Yeah.
I'm an art collector myself. And yeah, it's definitely like, if something speaks to me, then it can sometimes take me a while to work out why it does. And sometimes I'll never figure it out. But yeah, that's the beauty of art, I suppose.
No, exactly. I mean, you went to school, you went and studied art. And did they teach you how to interpret art and all that sort of stuff?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, the course that I did was very concept driven, and they taught a lot more about theory and concept behind art than they did actual skills on how to make it.
Yeah, right.
Which is, I wasn't quite prepared for at the time. I thought that I was going to be going on do a degree and I'd be a beautiful painter by the end of it.
Right.
But that wasn't the case, because I actually stopped painting pretty quickly and went into printmaking and photography.
Right.
I quite like the immediacy of those two mediums. But yeah, I think, but it's so long ago now.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not sure if I can remember anything that I was taught.
But I mean, that's the kind of the point of learning, right? You kind of absorb it, it becomes part of you, and then maybe it informs something later on, and maybe it doesn't. You get to pick and choose the parts that you want to keep, and you use the parts that you want to use.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something that I find with art is, I speak to artists who are very sort of purpose and concept driven, where they come up with a meaning or a concept they want to get across, and they build the art around that. Whereas I'm someone who just likes, I'm so visual that it doesn't really come to me until after I've created the artwork.
Really? That surprises me. That really surprises me. I thought your work is very concept driven. You always have so many props and outfits, and it always seems so thought out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, I think, well, in terms of the building of the environment, I think that's thought out, because I need to work out how to build the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a message for the image, I tend to almost literally just throw a whole bunch of crap in the pool and then take photos of it.
Great.
Yeah, it's
I think you're selling yourself short there.
Well, I mean, no, that's my process. It might not look like that at the end. And, it's the same with anything with photography. Like, you see this beautiful shot, but, you can see the model half, drowning and snot coming out of their face before before and after that amazing image you shot.
Sure.
And that's something I love about photography, is that it is just a slice of time. It doesn't matter what came before or after.
Yeah, I always say, if I come away from a shoot, if I'm in the water for like 2 hours, if I get one image that I'm really pleased with, then I'm happy with that.
Oh, no, I'm the same. Yeah. As long as you come away with at least one thing, I think it's a job well done.
Yeah. I guess it depends what kind of shoot you're doing. I mean, do you do a lot of like commercial shoots where you have a client that's paying?
I have done a few of those. It's not a huge part of my business, but yeah, that is a little more serious. I guess you have to come away with each concept, and
the expectations are higher.
Yes, but I think with those sorts of shoots, though, there's a lot more pre-production in there. You kind of have a lot more. Hopefully, you have a lot more time to kind of know exactly what you're trying to do, and how to get each kind of concept and each image.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of that?
I was about to say I steer well away from that now.
Right. Yeah.
I do the occasional commercial shoot, but it's like once a year maximum, really.
Yeah.
Because I used to do that for a living before. This this kind of like branch into this form of photography, like fine art photography, for me was like an opportunity not to have a client and a brief and to be working on other people's ideas. This is an opportunity for me to explore my own, I suppose. So I really enjoy the playfulness and not having to produce anything. And that's when I think that's when I work best, is when I get to make mistakes and learn from them.
And no one's sort of watching over your shoulder.
Yeah, basically.
And
definitely.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that if someone's come to you with something, commercial job, it's because they want you to do your thing, right?
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, right.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you do get clients like that are like, we think your work is incredible and we want you to do your thing. You've got complete creative freedom. Yeah. But yeah, there's still the pressure of like, when you actually really kind of quiz them on it, they're like, well, actually, we need this shot and this shot and this shot. And it's like, as soon as I'm given a shopping list, any kind of like ability to go off on a tangent and explore an idea when you're in the water, just, it goes out the window. You'd be like, right, I've done that. Now on to the next thing. And it's a checklist.
Yeah. And I guess, that's, the whole idea of an art director, I guess, is to sort of, constrain you a little bit and keep you on task, which is, as an artist, is probably not what you particularly need.
No.
Or want.
No.
Yeah. And so where, do you ever do commissions for people? Do you have people, like private clients who come and want to be in your photos?
Yeah, quite regularly people ask me that. But normally when I tell them the price that I charge for it, they change their mind.
Right. Yeah. And is that priced in that way to kind of make them change their mind?
I guess so. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But also, like, if they went ahead with it, then it would be an amount of money that I'd be, like, really happy with devoting a week of my time working with that person and training them to the point that I'd get successful images out of them. Because I think it's not as easy as people think it's going to be, as you well know.
No. Yes.
Yeah. People are like, oh, I'm really good in the water. And then, when I'm demanding things of them, they're like, oh, this is really hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. You might be great in the water. You might be wonderful at swimming from one end of the pool to the other, but this is not that.
No, it's different. Yeah.
So how do you approach that in terms of new models that you're working with?
I work with the same models all the time. I find people that I have a connection with, that get me and get my ideas and are, very uniquely talented. I do occasionally shoot like complete new people when I visit different destinations just to sort of try them out, I suppose. And I've enjoyed working with a few people that I've only had the opportunity shooting with once or twice, and they kind of go on my list of people that I'd like to work with again. But when it comes to planning big trips where I stay in a destination for like a month, for example, I will take my favorite people with me. So I've got that guaranteed. A lot of the time, if I'm visiting like Mexico, for example, I've got a couple of friends who live there who are just brilliant underwater models, but, they have a life and they have jobs. And when I visit a destination, they can't drop everything to shoot with me at dusk and dawn every single day. So I take models with me and pay them to be there with me. So it's and it's also kind of like, when they're trained freedivers and they're people that are, very skilled in that side of things as well. Like I can have one model that I'm shooting whilst the other one does safetying, and then they can swap over and stuff. So
that's good. So you've kind of got your crew with you anyway.
Yes.
And so are you just purely natural lighting? Do you ever use any kind of extra lighting?
Very rarely. I've got a couple of underwater constant lights, which I sometimes use for playful kind of long exposure stuff.
Okay. But
99% of the time it's natural light. So it's kind of relying on the the sun being in the right place and the, in relation to where the rocks are. And yeah, it makes things more challenging, but I think more special when it does all come together.
Yeah, no, totally. That thing, when those God rays sort of pop through and, and some, like, maybe the light hits someone just perfectly, which is not something you can ever recreate.
No, I think that's what I really love about the cenotes in Mexico is the light beams that you get there can be just, unreal. I think it looks like sort of cathedral lighting, light shining in through windows, and it's just light shining in through like the jungle canopy, but that's the kind of exciting light that I look for.
I think so. So I'm obsessed by the cenotes, and I think what happens in them in terms of the lighting and the landscape is what I am trying to do in my swimming pool a lot of the time.
Yeah.
This controlled, maybe it's a beam of light that's coming through, maybe someone's isolated in that, and, beautiful landscape underneath. And the first time I went to the cenotes, I was kind of like, oh, okay, shit. Well, this is where it's at. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, that's amazing. If you can recreate that in any kind of way, that's very exciting.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I'm not recreating it. It's all very, it only exists down there, that quality of light and, those sort of landscapes in such a controlled, it's not open water. There's no tides. There's no, real currents or anything. It's, it's really quite perfect down there.
It is. I'm currently planning my next trip there. I'm hoping to spend all of January there in next year.
Oh, nice. Do you do much video work?
No. In a nutshell. I'd like to do more video. My mind isn't very good at thinking in that dimension. Kind of like I've done a little bit, sort of like very short little clips that I can edit together to make something that's quite moving, I suppose. I think video and music together can be really special. I'd like to do more of that.
Yeah.
But I always spend 2 hours on a shoot just making the most of that light while it looks like that. And then by the time I think, or maybe I should do some video, that either the light's gone or we're exhausted or cold or...
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I need to dedicate some time where I'm just like, okay, I'm not allowed to take any stills. This whole shoot is dedicated to stills only. Movies
video.
only.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. So I mean, I do shoot a lot of video in my work, but I do have to basically take my stills brain out and then put my video brain in, because it's a whole different set of skills and muscle memory and.
I can't switch back and forth. That's for sure.
No, it's really hard. I always forget something when I'm shooting video, and then I kind of ruin the whole thing. But yeah, like you, I do love motion and music together, and so I shoot a lot of music videos. But It is kind of trying to take what I do in a still photo and then make it into a moving thing.
Yeah,
it's not the other way around for me.
Yeah, I'd be the same for sure.
So, what would you say is your best shoot? Is there one that sort of springs to mind where you're just like, this was the day that everything worked really well?
No, I should have had something prepared for this. Best shoot.
Or best location, or
Definitely best location. There's one particular cenote in Mexico, which is just like insane lighting, which I went there year before last, and there's one particular time of year where it is more clear than any other time for some reason. I have no idea why.
Right.
Something to do with the jungle canopy and what drops into the water, I think. I don't know. But it was just like, I think it's maybe 25 meters deep, and you could see directly to the bottom, and it's maybe about 25 meters wide as well, like a big circular pool in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah.
And just like shooting on that particular day when the visibility was insane, and I did a little dive down to the bottom and I just looked up and I could see all of the walls, these sort of sheer cliffs around the outside of the cenote, and I could see the surface, and yeah, visibility is what excites me. And again, another place that I really love to shoot is in the Mediterranean, near the island of Ibiza. It's a smaller island called Formentera. And I've been going there since I was, actually the first time I went there, I was in my mother's tummy. I was an
nice.
embryo. So I think that particular place is very close to my heart. And there's a area of that island where there's like cliffs that you have to sort of scramble down to get into the water. But when you do, there's like quite a sheer drop into the water. And so you get depth really, really quickly. You don't have to go out on a boat. You don't have to swim too far. You've got depth, and the water there can be just like gin clear, you know.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So when that is perfect and there aren't any jellyfish and or sediment in the water, then that can be really ideal. But that's like getting up at 5 a.m. to be in the water when the sun rises is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. So is that your favorite in terms of you emotionally prefer to be in the water at sort of sunrise, or sort of photography wise as well?
Emotionally, definitely not. Not a morning person.
Right. Yeah. So there's
the
struggle.
only thing. Yeah, it's the only thing I will get out of bed that early for is for a photo shoot. Yeah, I think probably one of my favorite examples of a shoot in that particular location was I did a shoot last summer with a parachute skirt that I bought this parachute on eBay, and it was like a 1973 vintage silk parachute, and I spent days before the trip kind of hand sewing it so it would be perfect kind of waist dimensions for my models to wear, and put some Velcro in the side so they could just rip it off and swim out if it was too challenging to swim in. And the day that we decided to shoot with it, that's when all of the conditions were just exquisite, just really, really perfect. So that definitely sticks in my mind as one of those kind of gasping underwater when you're taking images. That kind of feeling is pretty special.
I think, when you can hear yourself, when you can hear someone screaming underwater with glee and then you realize it's yourself. Yeah. I do that a lot. I quite like it. So conversely, what is your worst day?
I don't think they exist. Sometimes I find conditions very challenging, and that puts me in a really bad mood if I'm on location and just waiting for days and days for the weather to pass. I mean, that is the worst day. The worst day is not being able to get in. But if things are challenging, that's when I sometimes make my best work, I think.
Yeah.
If I find things limitations on, okay, I can't shoot in the way I normally would, that has in the past produced results which I, wouldn't have thought of doing, and therefore has produced, good work, I think. So I like challenges. I like it when things are thrown up and made difficult, because it just makes me just approach it from a different way.
I feel like that if you weren't someone who did well with challenges, you probably wouldn't shoot underwater for very long. Because everything about this is challenging.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you've got to be able to accept, losses, defeats.
Yeah.
Things aren't great. It makes it's like life generally, isn't it? The highs wouldn't be quite so sweet if, you didn't have some pretty terrible moments as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The lows do kind of highlight the highs a little bit. What about inspiration? Are you seeing work in the sort of art world, whether it's paintings or sculpture or that sort of stuff? What kind of makes your imagination go crazy?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm definitely drawn to art generally, and I fill my house with art, and I think different photographers and painters definitely inspire me from an aesthetic point of view. And I don't, I think probably more painting than photography, which is probably because of my background, I guess, going to art school. But I love the idea of making photography seem more painterly. I think that's something that a lot of people say when they see me at exhibitions. They say, is this photography? And it's like, I actually have a sign on my wall now, like vinyl lettering that says underwater photography, because I get so many people saying, is this a painting? Like, no.
Yeah, that's right. What do you want it to be?
Yeah, it could be whatever you want, but no. So yeah, I love the idea that you can kind of like be playful and creative with photography and experimental and blur boundaries and break rules. Like, I think I spent all of my commercial photography life trying to make very, kind of technically correct images that would please people from that perspective. Right. And becoming an artist is just so liberating that you can break rules, and you do get some like purist photographers approach you at exhibitions and say, oh, why have you done this? Like, I wouldn't have done that. And I'm like, well, exactly. That's exactly why I've done it.
Exactly. And that's why it's my work on the walls, not yours.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, your work definitely does have that sort of look to it. It does have that very painterly kind of aesthetic. So it's, I can definitely see why people are getting confused. So before we wrap it up, is there advice you would give to someone who wants to get into the underwater fine art world?
Advice. Yeah. I thought you said vice. It's like, what vice do you have?
That's right.
Well, don't drink as much coffee as me, because that doesn't help with your heart rate when freediving.
Yeah, totally.
That's a terrible vice.
Yeah. So what advice around all vices can you suggest to someone?
God, that's a good question. I would say, it sounds really obvious, but like, just get out there and practice as much as possible. Like, I know that the biggest question that I'm asked from people who want to give it a try is like, what camera should I get? And I honestly think that, if you've got a camera that has some kind of manual control, so you can control, the aperture and shutter speed, then it doesn't matter whether you're spending hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds, because it's in the eye of what you choose to do with it, rather than like having the best possible camera in the world. In my opinion, I don't know. I started off with like it's a 35mm film camera that was very hit and miss. Yeah. Definitely out of a roll of 36 photos, I would get 0 good results.
Right, yeah.
But, it started me off on my journey. But, just like even getting a cover for your iPhone. iPhone's incredible these days. You can
absolutely
achieve things like that. Obviously, you can't go too deep with those. Although, do Outex do like one that you can go to depth with?
Yeah, they do. I can't remember what the depth is on that, but it can go fairly deep. And then there are other housings that are basically dive housings for the iPhone, so you can take them to 100 feet if you want to. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that's my kind of ethos as well, is that it's not the cost of the camera, it's whether it does what you need it to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say GoPros are incredible for starting out, but the thing that I find frustrating with my GoPro is not having the ability to really kind of control all of the, all of the functions that I'd like to.
No,
exposures. I tend to underexpose slightly, because the dynamic range is just so incredible with the Sony that I use. I underexpose, so I don't ever kind of like lose, don't blow highlights, and you can bring back shadows really, really nicely with the Sony cameras, I found.
Well, so that actually is a really good point, because I was trying to reverse engineer your work to sort of see how you had done some of these things, and saying that you don't use any external lights. I was just like, wow, she must just really get such amazing files to start with. Like, you must have just very good files to be able to work with in post, to be able to get the detail that you have.
I think the camera system that I use is just incredible. I made the switch from Canon to Sony back in 2018, and that was just like total game changer. I mean, I was shooting on a DSLR with a Canon system, so I can't comment on how their mirrorless systems are. I think that's, I think swapping from from a DSLR to a mirrorless was really, just vital to be able to shoot through the rear screen rather than having to use the viewfinder, and that made a really big difference. But my camera is 5 years old now, I think,
Right.
and it produces really nice file sizes, and the dynamic range is brilliant. The focusing system with the Sonys is insane. So if I'm intending for the subject to be in focus, then it gets it in focus every single time.
Right. Yeah.
I say that because, sometimes my images are intentionally blurred.
Yeah, you do. Like,
it is
sort of change
intentional.
the focus of it. Yeah, no.
It's not just a mistake, I promise.
Well, even if it is a mistake, at least you're using it and owning it. It's great.
Owning it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, Lexi, this has been really great. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and sort of share your story. It's been amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I feel like I've just been rambling on, but it's been really lovely to chat to you, for sure.
Yeah. And rambling on is exactly what this show's all about. So
I could easily ramble on for another hour or two, but that would probably get boring.
Maybe we'll come back in a year or so and we'll do it again.
Revisit. Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. If you'd like to support with the production of these episodes, you can purchase our very cool merchandise at theunderwaterpodcast.com. We've got branded coffee mugs, stickers, beer cozies, and posters featuring our amazing illustration and logo by Joe Hodino. If you'd like to connect with us or learn more about our guests, you can reach us at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group where you can discuss the episodes and even get your questions answered by our guests. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, don't forget about Waterproof magazine, showcasing the best in underwater art. Read it online or purchase a print edition at waterproofmag.org. You can learn more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring at brettstanley.com or Brett S Photo on Instagram. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.